vibration and time. That's all there is in the organoid. And so what we're experimenting with is the connection between interorganoid communication.
Hi, everybody. This is Victoria Vesna, and you're listening to Vibrations Matter. I talk to artists, scientists, and everybody who's interested in light, sound, and frequencies. Join me.
Hi, Victoria.
Perfect. Hi,
I'm in the
Kenny.
misty mountains of Ojai. It's probably the same where you are, a little misty.
It's misty, and I just came back from Topanga, where I was in a short meditation session. It was wonderful.
Hmm.
So, uh, I am going back in time, especially with you, because we met so long ago. I mean, what are we talking about? 30 years?
90s.
Yes, yes. So close to 30 years, I think. When did you finish your PhD at UC
In
Santa Barbara?
2000.
Wow,
That's the time
amazing.
you were sort of establishing at UCLA, right?
That's right. That's exactly the year that I left Santa Barbara and you left for China.
Hmm.
There you
And
go.
haven't looked back since.
Exactly. I actually remember the moment you were asking me, do you think I should go? It was some kind of conference or symposium you were going to
Yeah, in
initially.
1999, there was
Mhm.
a International Computer Music Conference.
That's right. And I was like, yeah, absolutely, go, go, go. You never came back.
Oh, no, that was the last year, so I made a piece for the conference
Right, right.
that was
Beautiful.
played at Tsinghua University, and then my daughter ends up going there to the attached high
Incredible.
school there.
Incredible. Yeah, so it's life is really interesting and we're making a full circle and we're also celebrating 20 years of the Artsci Center, which
Hmm.
is feeling as a completion as well. And then we just had the New Year of the Snake, which is basically shedding the old skin and we're starting new. The whole world is in chaos, but eventually, hopefully, the pieces fall into the right place.
So are normal.
Things are abnormal.
Things are normally abnormal,
Exactly.
but then it's good that you have this circle behind you and me, I guess.
Yes, yes. Thank you for the circle. Maybe we can start by talking about that. What am I sitting in front of?
You're sitting in, well, behind you is a score that we recently have been working on.
Ah, beautiful.
Um, yeah, so each ring is a part, right? But each person is in a different location on the network. So it's a network music score. Um, and so it's a whole system. So it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of yeah, all the things I'm working on are sort of connected in a way with network music, network scores, and this particular piece then is something we just finished, and it sort of explores this idea of polychrony.
Okay, let's dig into that one. Can you dissect what that means?
Yeah, so just like in the time when monophony was sort of transitioning into polyphony, they were exploring this new sort of dimension of harmonic, the harmonic space, right? So it was also related to architecture in that there were these resonant cathedrals,
Mm,
right? Like Notre Dame, and that the
right.
monophony would echo around and create harmonies. And yet that didn't, it was all developing all, over hundreds of years. But um, I was just imagining the first composers of polyphony in that space, their neural circuitry lighting up with possibilities. So that's sort of what is here. We're used to monochrony,
Yes,
for
especially in the on the networks, it's been a real issue that you've been dealing with for many, many years.
yeah.
So yeah, so it's fantastic to think spatially. And do colors mean something as well?
No, the colors just are sort of to differentiate. So
Different,
you can
the
sort of
different
tell if you're
spaces.
ring number one or ring number three or something. They're sort of
Yeah.
randomized.
So let's not go back in time because what immediately came to my mind is when we collaborated the very first time in the 90s on Bodies Incorporated. It was a, it was networks very early on, 97, and you were very much already starting to think about networks and sound, and we were relating body parts to sounds. So you actually created sounds for each part of the body and the texture, the corporate body that we were all creating that now we're all part of. So, I would really like to get a sense of that journey. In other words, you were doing one of the first PhDs, maybe even the first one that was combining art, music, and engineering. And that's where we met, where we started working together. And then you started going on this path that I lost you from time to time. So there's been years where we lost contact. And then there was the Chi conference with Roy Ascott and the
Chi
consciousness reframed.
complexity.
Exactly. So give us a little bit of path and in the sense of light bulb moments, like there was probably a moment even in UCSB when you were pulling all your interests together, and maybe even before, actually, like as a child, why did you get interested to take on this kind of exploratory path?
Well, one of the earliest things I remember is that you were in the East Village of New York City, and so was I. I think it
That's
was
right.
contemporaneous. It was early 80s,
Yes, yes.
right? And at that time, electronic music was sort of coming into the fields, like early samplers or early synths and stuff like that. And I had a band. You had a band.
That's right.
I don't know if you were electronic, but we were all electronic. We were drum machines
We
and
started exploring for sure, also with animation, with all kinds of electronics, acoustics,
yeah,
analog, just playing, just without any constraints, which is, I think, what was wonderful about that time. That there
yeah.
was this moment where anybody could jump on stage and just do something. And to have shared and overlapped there, we didn't know each other, but we were in the same vibe.
Yeah, we were going in and out of the same bars probably. And
Probably.
but I was also at the same time I was working at a bookstore there. So I
Which
was
one?
still the Strand bookstore, Weiser's bookstore.
Strand.
Do
Oh
you
my
remember
goodness.
Weiser's?
Of course.
Yeah,
Yes.
called bookstore. So I was already reading Kabbalah and
Yes.
like
Yes.
that and early mysticism. And
Absolutely. Same here. That was overlapping with my work too. It wasn't really in the front, but definitely in parallel. Very similar path.
mhm. And then yeah, I went to Japan for a while. We were sort of experimenting with clubs there. I was still doing music. And I remember one time working on what I might, what I probably said was this symphony, right? Done in MIDI. And my
Right.
computer crashed and I lost the symphony. And so I said, I think I better, you know, do this academically, go to, study it, learn how to write it. So I don't like totally lose this just because the technology's crashed.
Ah,
So that's when I went to
interesting.
UCSB in 1994 or something, or
Uh-huh.
92.
Wow, we came there at the same time, Ken.
Mhm.
Identical time we both arrived to
Yeah,
Santa
from New York
Barbara.
City to
Using Santa
California.
Barbara, yeah. Interesting. Wow. I didn't even know that. I mean, maybe I did, but coming back to it after so many years, it's interesting how our paths overlapped.
Mm. And then it was the multimedia and the media arts, and there was no degree, remember? So I did an
Yes,
interdisciplinary degree program, and that was the first
it was the
probably media
first.
arts degree in the US. And then at UCSB, they went on to create the MAT program,
Right.
Media Arts and Technology program.
Yeah. So take me back a little further. If you go back to your childhood,
Oh, yeah.
where were you? And did you already start experimenting with sound and light and thinking of what you wanted to do, or
No,
just
I was into guitar and singing.
uh-huh.
I would sing acoustic guitar playing in clubs or something, but I was roaming around in the mountains of Santa Barbara.
So you
So that was
literally,
after high school.
but you literally grew up in Santa Barbara
After high school,
after high school.
I grew up around Chicago.
I see. Were you born in Chicago?
Yeah, almost like a little north of
Almost.
that.
Almost.
Small town in Wisconsin called Milwaukee.
Oh, nice.
I
Uh-huh.
haven't been talking about this for many years.
Yeah, well,
Seems foreign.
that's what I'm interested in. I actually am very curious how these cycles happen in one's life, and also the basis of explorations that sometimes are connected to the environment we come from, whether we want to break out of it or whether we
Yeah.
have some roots in the environment itself. But it actually,
It was definitely a flight
I'm sure, I'm sure.
from the mundane life of the Midwest.
Yeah, yeah. But as a child, you may have had some moments that were also significant in your thinking or
Well,
growing.
yeah, I
To
mean,
get to
if
the point where you wanted to break out, you must have had some kind of explorations to grow into that moment.
that probably had something to do with nature. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. That's where I was going.
And
Because
then
really, that's what you ended up really tapping into, especially when you went to China and looking at all the systems that are so related to natural systems and energy fields and all this wonderful work that you were doing and continue to do is really based in natural sequences.
mm,
All right, so take us back to
take
uh
us back before I was born.
that's interesting. Do you remember your past life?
No, but
Yeah, but circle back to 2000. So you go off to this conference. And what happened there? Because you literally stayed, as far as I can remember. Or
yeah,
you,
basically,
yeah,
I
go
came
ahead.
back to finish up the paperwork, the PhD, and then I jetted back there because Beijing at that time was totally blooming,
Truly.
coming out of its cocoon of the 90s.
Mhm.
So that was kind of interesting over the past 25 years to see this emerging megalopolis
Yeah. So what
from
happened
nature
at
to the megalopolis.
that's right.
But lucky I
And
did because then I went back and
yes.
you know, taught the first sort of electronic music and
Where?
and the arts courses at the Conservatory of Music, at Beijing University, at the China Central Academy of Fine Arts.
So
Did
you
a
were
lot of
making the rounds.
Yeah, did a lot of traveling around China and other talks around other universities. And now I'm at the Chinese University, Chinese Academy of Sciences.
Beautiful.
It may be, I'm in a school of the science of human habitat.
Oh my goodness.
It's
That
a new
sounds
school,
amazing. It
just
must be
established
new.
1 year ago.
Wow.
We have architecture, art, and design, and
In Beijing?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
and we
Beautiful.
have an art science center,
Amazing.
which we
Amazing.
should probably talk about and have some cooperation.
We absolutely should because, and I will talk to you about this later. We're celebrating 20 years of the Arts Sci Center, believe it or not, this year, and doing a whole thing with it. So it would be wonderful for you to host something. I'm thinking of doing different continents and friends who are in different continents, different time zones to present things. So we'll definitely reach out to you. So back to you. So then you're in China and you basically stayed there, yes?
Yeah, sure.
You get married.
And we
You're
did the Chi and Complexity Conference in
Yes, let's talk about
2004.
that. Let's talk about that because for me personally, that was very significant. That was such a wonderful connection and statement about uh, the value of thinking outside of the material realm and to connect it to vibrations and chi energy. And a lot of this was at that point for younger audience members, the anything spiritual was kind of looked down at, especially in academia. So it was really transgressing, and our mentor Roy Ascott was kind of on the forefront of transgressing that to a lot of problems and obstacles that was created in his career, but he kept pushing and he was inviting a lot of us from different parts of the world to help bring that back in. And you did this conference was actually related also to the consciousness reframed that we did with Roy also leading. And so tell us a little bit about that because I thought it was very significant.
Um, yeah. Also, we had the 20-year anniversary of that conference in July, right?
Right.
Were you part of, did you do?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes. Yeah, I
So
forgot
in
about
July,
that.
yeah,
That's
I went
right.
down to Hangzhou and at the Shanghai Siva,
Uh-huh.
Roy's studio there.
Yes,
And Roy was the De Tao master,
that's right. That's
which
right.
I also was, and about 8 years ago. It was 2016 or
Same
something.
here. I was Data master also just for 1 year. And around that time, actually, like 2015, 16 as well, or maybe
Yeah,
earlier.
so
Yeah.
De Tao sort of was an interesting phase, that
Mm-hmm.
of promotion and support. So I developed Artsmesh with that, the software, the network music performance software. I call it a digital presence workstation. So it basically manages all the tasks of a network music concert.
Mm-hmm. And we experimented with that together.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, chi and complexity. So it's sort of like that the elephant kind of thing where people explore different aspects of it and consider it um, what it is, from their own perspective. Um, so chi is reminded me of the theory of complexity that we were so much speculating about at that time, theoretically, the complexity sciences.
That's right.
Um, So we sort of I sort of thought, well, chi might be this idea of the um, like complex relationships of energies
Mhm,
um, and thought, consciousness.
mhm.
And, but it was just this umbrella thing that I think inspired a lot of speculative thought, which was what that conference was for.
Right.
And we had a concert at the conservatory. We had a gallery show, multimedia at the
Hmm.
Red Gate Gallery.
Yes.
We did talks at CAFA, Central Academy of Fine Arts. I think you guys stayed in South Beijing and
Yes.
one of the campuses of Beijing University. So
Yes.
it was a citywide kind of thing, which was really difficult to pull together at that time when
Of course.
nobody was talking to each other.
Yeah, I was very ambitious, but you pulled it off. You really did.
Sure.
You-
A couple of buses
Yeah, the bus rides, I remember that.
and then our famous, infamous celebration at the Summer Palace.
Uh-huh.
Can't do that anymore
Oh,
these
is that
days.
right? It's
So we had
out of reach
access
now.
right on the lake overlooking the lake out there.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that was really amazing. And it was a particular point of time in China that probably is not happening anymore. And the same thing as when you look back to New York, it
Hmm.
certainly was like a point of time, like this little bubble of time for
Yeah.
like openness and experimentation and new thinking. And then it just kind of clamps down. Um, so, but you kept going. You kept going with the art mesh. You were very persistent.
That's where it started developing network music because
Exactly. You
I was
had
in
to.
Asia and my
You had
colleagues
to.
all over the place.
Yeah, you had to.
So I remember the first concert we did was with Chris Chafin
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
out at Stanford. So we did over the research network using Jack Tripp, and so we had a concert of we did Terry Riley piece in
Oh,
C. And there are some
beautiful.
musicians at Beijing University and some musicians at Stanford.
Mm-hmm.
So that was around 2006 or seven or something like that. But from that, I decided to make a whole program of it, and I went to Canada as Canada Research Chair in telemedia
Exactly.
arts, and I had a dedicated studio for networked arts, network music specifically. And we started developing prototypes for
Mm-hmm.
Artsmesh.
Mm-hmm. And so what's going on in that program now, not since you left?
I have no idea.
Oh, you lost touch with the whole program.
Yeah, that was like a 5 year,
Oh, I see, I
five-year
see.
plan,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and I didn't want to stay away from China. I was kind of going back and forth anyway, and that was one of the features. Basically, was this because I was still sort of collaborating with the conservatory, and
Mm-hmm.
they put in it's called CERNET, is the China Educational Research Network, which was a developed, you know, IPv6 next generation network. So they put that in there for me.
Oh, wow. Amazing.
So I had this natural partner, Trans-Pacific, and we did a lot of
Because you
experimentation
had
over there.
to. Yeah, yeah, it's great.
Yeah, so we had this relationship that was just like a built-in feature of permanent experimentation, and then the time is constant. So we were like 200 milliseconds basically um,
Mm, incredible.
relate in relation to each other.
Especially at that time, that's so impressive. You know, it was way ahead of its time in the sense of speed and the connection. Yeah,
Mhm. And
impressive.
but that sort of illuminated the whole phenomena of why it was interesting at the time, because it was a historic time of separating musicians
Mm-hmm.
in time.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I say, this idea of moving from monochrony to polychrony,
Mm-hmm.
right? We have always had that experience of monochrony, one time space. We're
Mm-hmm.
interacting in the local context. Musicians play together, they're on a downbeat. We speak to each other in the local context where there's no delay. But musicians, of course, when they play music, there's a high sensitivity to time,
Mm-hmm.
time difference, leaning in, leaning out. And so a real opportunity to explore a new phenomena, you know, of multi-time spaces together. So, like, for example, what you're looking at is like 5 different time spaces,
Mm-hmm.
right? So in a sense, the space disappears. We're all um, we're remote, but the space isn't the issue. That the temporal difference is the significant issue. So we do loops, right? So the form of the score as a loop is actually suggests this form for exploring, because we can make the loops of different lengths, and in that space it sort of freezes the frame, through repetition,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
you get to sort of stabilize the frame of the multi-time spaces coming together.
So
And
it's almost like a quantum field, right? Because you're bouncing off and the repetition is what's stabilizing it. Is that
you're
right?
stabilizing when you establish that groove, right? And
Got it.
all the musicians are like zeroed in on the
Mm-hmm.
pull and tug of multi-time spaces.
Mm-hmm. What a
Um,
beautiful thing. What a beautiful vision, too.
and so in that, it gives you the opportunity in that expanding sort of space of presence to expand your consciousness in that way, because your
Mm-hmm.
your frame of presence widens. And so we are 200 milliseconds apart or 500 milliseconds apart, but with the expansion of presence and the moment of presence, you are in a shared time frame.
So is it in a way beyond the space and time that's usually our reference, is what you're saying?
It's a time space. It's like
Uh-huh.
the space disappears,
Right.
and the time differences come together in one, like what a Bergsonian durational types of sense, right? An
So
expanded sense of duration.
so give us an example. If you're in China, I'm in New York, let's say, somebody is in LA, somebody is in Vienna, another person's in Manila, and then another joins us from Brazil, from Sao Paulo, and we
Yes.
want to work together. We are somebody is in the middle of the night, somebody is in the morning. So how do you deal with those differences of where the sun is at the moment?
We do our best to
Do
coordinate
our
those times
best.
where you're not up too late and you're not up too early in the morning.
Mhm,
But
mhm.
the past year we've developed this application called the Netronome.
Cool.
So the network metronome.
Mhm.
So what that does is, I call it the well-tempered network, like the well-tempered clavier. You're tuning the time space. So I'm in Beijing and you're in New York, but our server may be, somewhere in San Francisco or something. Our latencies are slightly different. You're 120, I'm 220 or something. So what we do is we tune that to a
Mm-hmm.
1-to-1 ratio or a 2-to-1
Mm-hmm.
ratio,
Mm-hmm.
a rational musical ratio,
Mm-hmm.
so that it equals a quarter note or an eighth note or something that we can play together. And the same with, say, Rio. Their delay will be 300 milliseconds. But if we choose 500 milliseconds as the eighth note, we just have to delay their signal a couple hundred. You have to delay a few hundred to get to 500 milliseconds, and I have to delay a few to get to 500 milliseconds. Then essentially, we have this quarter note to the server, or to you. You have a quarter note to Rio. Rio has a quarter note to Beijing, etc. So we can establish a musical um, a musical temporal frame to play in. And that's why we can do these nice loops, because it's so timed nicely.
Beautiful, beautiful. And do you have an example of a recent concert that was
I think I just sent you a little video if you want to pull it up, but
okay, okay, I'll do that. Wonderful, wonderful.
but then so that's like a continuum. Like if you just play on untuned networks, um, it's basically wild nature. You know, that's a hard place to start, but
Yes.
it's a nice place to aim for.
Uh-huh.
So the other side of the continuum is this perfectly tuned temporal
Mm.
space where you can play quarter notes. You're not on the same downbeat,
Right, right.
because every location, because of offsets, is a different piece. We're all
Mm.
playing the same piece, but it's called a topo rhythm, a place rhythm,
Uh-huh.
where because my offset to you and Rio's offset to you, we're coming in at different beats. So all the beats are sort of reorganized depending on where you are.
I see. And so
Right.
this requires a particular software that
It's called a metronome. It's an Ableton Live plugin, and it's a Max MSP
so very
patch.
very easy for someone to set up.
Hopefully, but
You're working on it still.
we've been doing network music for 20 years,
I know, I know.
right? And not a lot of people have jumped into that space because it's a little
So
bit,
it's so difficult. It's not just technologically difficult, but it's difficult. Uh, it requires a particular mind frame, I should say. So for a lot of people who are trained to think in certain ways, uh, as far as music goes, which is exactly what you're saying, you're actually breaking a lot of those rules because you're having to go from mono to plural and
yeah.
also beyond space create a new time, right? So it's like a whole nother time frame. It's not just a technological problem. You have to, I'm assuming you have to find players, collaborators who can tune in mentally into that space. It's like
Yeah.
it's a mental configuration that you're developing. So not somebody, oh yeah, you're great in guitar, let's do it. I don't think it would work right away. And you probably run into that a lot, I have a feeling.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So
Because
can, mhm.
we've named that there's kind of like an aphasia. It's called like a sort of disorientation when you get into the space. When you're trying to conceive of
Yes,
the temporal relationships between,
yes.
like what am I hearing, what are you hearing, and what is the complex signal paths that we have going between us. And so
So are you teaching this? I mean, it's really got many layers. It's got the philosophical layer, it's got the conceptual layer, and then there's the musical layer or sound, and then finally the technological, which is not that simple, to also tap into. So there's a lot to learn to participate. Is this something that you teach, or do you have a group of people that you're
yeah,
really in tune with and you just are constantly going for it and then you're expanding
I
it
wish
out? You wish?
I wish I had
I'll
a
sign
band.
up. I'll sign up. Can we
I mean, I
do?
wish I had a band in Victoria. Maybe you would like to be in.
I sign me up because I think we may have made a full circle and now can start working together again. I just think
But
I get it. Let's put it that way. I totally get it. And I also know you and how you think. And because I have also family relations in China, I get that too. The complexity and also the Buddhistic side of ephemeral and no space and time. So
mhm.
I think it's just so, it's very revolutionary what you're talking about. And it must be fraught with difficulties and
Oh
obstacles.
yeah, you can imagine.
I can
Of course,
imagine.
I have a class, right?
Okay, let's start right there.
They're master students. So you
Right.
can just jump into this kind of thing because,
Of course. They're
you know, I,
programmed.
I used to have a multi-year program where you start with synthesis techniques and then you go to,
Right.
composition, digital scores, and then maybe a little network music. But because of moving to the Academy of Sciences,
Oh, yeah.
I just thought instead of this approach, linear approach, start from the beginning and build up, I just consider it like a lab,
Yes. Yes.
where you have students of all different levels. And the beginning students learn from the more advanced students and stuff, but you just kind of throw them into the lab.
Yes.
You have a task, and everybody does what they can do. You know,
Right.
if you want to plug in the speakers, or this person wants to do the coding, and this person understands the server
Yeah.
setup and all, and
Well,
the
that's the new type of band. That's the new type of kind of collective work. And I find that working with masters students who are very technically able is much harder than bringing in a high school student who's just experimenting and can just jump into it and then later understand what they were doing.
Mhm,
So it's actually interesting that you're pushing them all together because it's not also the academia cannot take that in, right? Because
mhm.
I mean I've run into
Well, I
those
call it an
groups.
orchestra.
Yes,
So
yes,
it's a laptop orchestra.
right.
Right. So there's a laptop orchestra at Beijing University that we're developing, and then Academy of Sciences and the Conservatory and other places. So everybody has their local ensemble or orchestra,
Hmm.
and then we put them together over the network. So they're networked ensembles. But
That's
locally, there's even we do audio over Ethernet,
uh-huh.
right?
Yeah,
So we
yeah,
we
much
don't
more
have to have the
stable.
big mixer for 50 students,
Right,
right? It's all
right,
plug
right,
into the router and it's mixed on the server
right, right.
using Artsmesh or something.
But you could ostensibly pull together, and I'll just kind of make it large, 50 50 participants, let's just not even call them musicians, and from different parts of the world, and we're all connected through Ableton and mixing and doing. What about acoustic instruments? Or
Absolutely.
so totally you can plug that in as well.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
I mean, you
Yeah,
can have a microphone source or you could have a synth source
right, right. Fantastic.
or playing sampled sounds of environments and
Uh-huh.
capturing the rhythms and those sort of environmental sounds and
Amazing,
playing along with them.
amazing. The one thing that I love about this work of yours is the persistence of vision. I mean, you literally were doing this little after we met. You started going for it, and you kept going, and
Mhm.
you just stayed with it, even though I'm sure it was a path full of obstacles of linear-minded people who are like expecting steps and certain ways of doing things, and
In China,
etc.
it was relatively easy
At some point, I'm
be-
sure.
because
Yeah.
it because people didn't really have expectations
Exactly. It was so
on
new.
electronic music, so
Interesting. So you actually found the freedom that you didn't in the West and more kind of elaborate sound
well, I
environments.
had very interesting professors who are super open-minded like
That
you.
is true.
So it wasn't
Yeah, no, you were
other
fine. But I'm talking about in general as it being accepted, because even when you did the little workshop a few years ago, I could see where it really took people, they weren't wrapping their heads around it very easily. They were
the
just,
art size symposium.
yes, yes. So there was, of course, a few who totally got it and were very excited, but I could see where it would take a little bit of bringing in, because they know so much about different electronics, and so they're immediately making references. And it actually doesn't have that many references. It's a new thing. It's a new way of working, thinking, collaborating, communicating. It's quite wonderful, Ken. I really appreciate it. So how do people access this or experiment with it? Or do you have it where people can
Yeah,
download things? How does this
the
work?
metronome is new.
Yeah.
So it's on GitHub,
Uh-huh.
and yeah, anybody can download it's a Max for Live thing, and it's also a Max MSP patch, but
Yeah.
that's a little bit more hard to set up. It
Right.
requires some it's called like inter audio application routing and stuff using
Mm-hmm.
loopback. So sometimes the networked aspect is the easy part. It's like doing the setup and the signal routing to get the microphone to the
Right.
server.
Do you have
Takes,
tutorials or something, or like maybe an online course that you could do?
there's not an online course. There's a couple tutorials on the GitHub site
Uh-huh.
for the metronome.
Mm-hmm.
There's tutorials on Artsmesh.
Uh-huh. So
Artsmesh is
we'll
like a
have
pro tool, though. It's not a good place to start.
uh-huh. Okay. Well, we'll have links for people, but maybe we can even organize something where you can do a deep dive intro into it for
Yeah.
people who want to
One thing I
experiment.
should mention before we do head off is that at here when I get to Santa Barbara, I can go up to UCSB, and I'm working with Marcus Novak and
Great.
the Ken Kosick Biolab, Neurobiology Lab.
Oh, fantastic.
And we've got something called the Organoid Orchestra. So
Cool.
we're working with brain organoids, right?
Wow.
And so the temporal aspect of that is also very interesting because
hmm
these organoids are basically random neural energy generators, right? They're new organisms, and they're firing and they're exploring and they're curious little organisms. and they start forming connections and stuff like that. But
Mm-hmm,
there's no
mm-hmm.
body, there's no eye, ear sense, right? What I imagine it, there's a sense of time in that
Ah, yes,
one
of
neuron
course.
fires and another one takes like a couple milliseconds to get from one neuron to the other neuron biochemically. But they're aware of the time relationship. They don't have maybe an aspect of space. It's all a sense of maybe vibration
Mm-hmm,
to
mm-hmm.
get to our topic here.
Yeah, yes, finally.
Vibration and time. That's all there is in the organoid. And so what we're experimenting with is the connection between um, interorganoid communication, right? Like having a biolab in China communicate with the biolab here, while we tap into the data that the firing data and the temporal patterns that we find and sonify them and make music with them and send patterns back, send music back. But, you know, what we send back is maybe patterns like a 5 hertz pulse
Mm-hmm,
or
mm-hmm.
a harmonic relationship, but like a 2 to 1 or
Yeah,
a
yeah.
2 to 3 or something simple where the frequencies are in resonance harmonically, like a Pythagorean sort of relationship. So these simple type of patterns may be understood. So when we talk about uh, you know intelligence or consciousness, we're not talking about a higher level consciousness. We're talking about like a proto-sentience,
Mm, mm.
proto-sentience.
Gorgeous. I love it. It feels like the first connection of the internet, you know? It's except it's organoids and biolabs. So you have a collaborator in China in a biolab who's interested in this.
Yeah, so I have some PhD students who are working on this, and it's harder to find a biolab there that's going to collaborate
I could
as
imagine.
readily,
Yes, yes.
as Ken Kosick's lab and
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
the students there who it's not so far out for them to want to not only visualize the firing data in a chart, but hear it,
Right, right.
mapped to frequency and temporal resolution.
Yes.
So
Beautiful.
it's all related
It's all
from
related.
from the
Absolutely.
microscopic to the planetary.
Absolutely. I'm with you. What a beautiful way to end our chat. And I have to say, you're really an inspirational friend and collaborator. And I can see where we do something together and we invite the audience to participate, those who are willing to go beyond the usual way of thinking of time and space and get into the vibrations that we connect with and really just think of ourselves as planetary citizens and stop separating into these awful tribal groups. Create a new vibe, right?
Hmm.
A new melody. So
Yeah,
thank you
we've
so
always
much,
had
Kenny.
that nice relationship of collaboration.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much for taking the time, and we're going to share also the links to everybody. Uh,
Thank you. I hope I see you soon.
you will, you will. Bye, Kenny.
Bye bye.
Bye.